We'll do a review of Likutei Sichas in Chelek Tezvav, volume 15. We'll do the sicha base for Parshas Vayechi, the second sicha on the portion of Vayechi. This sicha, the Rebbe discusses the levels of Ephraim and Menashe, Yaakov and Yosef. The fact is that Menashe was the Bechoir, was the firstborn. And that means, to a certain level, the firstborn has special qualities. So that means, in a way, that Menashe had some advantages over Ephraim, who was second to him. On the other hand, Yaakov says that, no, I know that Menashe is the Bechor, but I'm still going to put my right hand on Ephraim, notwithstanding that he's not the Bechor, because he's going to be greater than his brother. And the Rebbe is going to say they're both going to be great in various different areas, and there is no mistaking over here. He's Taka the Bechor, but for Yaakov's service, Avodah, the most important thing was Ephraim. And on the other hand, in Yosef, since he was born first, that means that by Yosef, Menashe is the Bechor. And the Rebbe will explain about the various approaches to challenges in Golus, which Ephraim and Menashe were born there, whether it is by the name Menashe to constantly remember your father's home, or it's from Ephraim to change around Hifrani Beretz Oni. We'll see beautifully. The Rebbe explains all the details. So let's go inside Ois Aleph. In Heintige Sedre Werder erzählt, in today's portion, it is related. The Yosef hat weggestellt seine zwei Sinn, that Yosef stood up his two sons, Ephraim and Menashe, for Yaakov and before Yaakov, as soll sie benchen, that he should bless them. But Yaakov hat gelegt seine rechte Hand auf Ephraim, and Yaakov placed his right hand on Ephraim, und seine linke Hand auf Menashe, and his left hand on Menashe. When Yosef had when Yosef saw this, is Vayera be'einav goymer, as the verse says, he was bad in his eyes. Vayomer Yosef el aviv, so Yosef says to his father, Lo kein avi, no, this is not right, my father. Kizeh Menashe b'choir sim yimin chal rosheh. This one, Menashe, is the older one. Put your right hand on his head. So Yosef argued that really the right hand of Yaakov belongs on Menashe, and the one who was older. But what did Yaakov answer? At Yaakov geantwortet, Yodati b'ni Yodati. I know my son, it's not a mistake. Goymer, I know that he is the firstborn. V'ulam, however, Ochiv hakotten yigdal mimenu Goymer. His younger brother, Ephraim, is going to be greater than Menashe. And Vayosem es Ephraim lifnei Menashe. And he placed Ephraim before Menashe. So, this is not by accident that one is born a Bechor. The fact that Menashe was the Bechor means that that is some advantage that he has from birth that Hashem gave him. That's why he was born first. Otherwise, if it didn't have that, why was not Ephraim born first? Darf man verstehen. So we need to understand. Das, was a Bechor bekommt, a größere Brache, wie alle andere Kinder, this that a firstborn, a Bechor, receives a greater blessing more than all other children, is as their far, that is because was a Bechor hat in sich a Meile v'chashivus legabe de andere Kinder, because the Bechor has an advantage, has an importance relative to the other children. Heint vibald as Ephraim is größer b'Meile v'Menashe. So as the pasuk, as Yaakov says, that Ephraim is greater in level than Menashe. Ochiv hakotten yigdal mimenu. Yaakov says his brother, younger brother, will be greater than Menashe, than the older brother. Farvoshe is milchatchila ishtalgvorn. How come it was milmaila? How come it was set up from above? As Menashe zol zayin der bechor legabe Ephraim, that Menashe should be the bechor relative to Ephraim. Why wasn't it the reverse order? Is der fun gedrungen? So from this we can derive, we understand. As trotz dem was Achiv hakoten yigdal mimenu gomer. Notwithstanding the fact that Yaakov says that his younger brother will be greater than him, etc. Is over do amayle Menashe legabe Ephraim. There is an advantage in Menashe relative to Ephraim. Mitzad other mayle is erder b'cher Yosef, and for that advantage, he is the firstborn of Yosef. So what's going on over here? Nor b'shayches to birches Yaakov, when in connection as it relates to Yaakov's blessing, is wichtig der inyan. Then this matter is important in welchen Ephraim is hecher from Menashe, in which Ephraim is higher than Menashe. And the riber, and that's why by Yosem es Ephraim with Menashe, he put Ephraim before Menashe. That's what comes out from the fact that he says he's greater, and Ephraim and Menashe is still the Bukhar. So the Rebbe brings out, wants to bring out that there's two levels over here. There's different avodas. So the Rebbe says that the Chalal is not shaykh to say that there's a mistake in what they did. So not only because he is the Bechor, the Rebbe argues, but the fact that Yosef says he is the Bechor, put his hand, there is a lasting argument here. It didn't come out in Poil that Yaakov benched Ephraim before Menashe, Yosem Lefnei, but still, Yosef was not a mistake thinking it is lasting, and there is an advantage to Menashe over Ephraim as well. Based. There's another matter that we get at, as we spoke of many times, is by tzaddikim, by righteous people, especially when we talk about the forefathers and the tribes. It doesn't apply. They made a mistake, God forbid. Especially in their matters which are written in the true Torah. So it's not, there is no mistakes over there. They are for sure matters that are true and eternal. While Torah is Meloshin Hira, and Torah comes from the language instruction, Hira, is this Oicha Hira Nitzchis. So there's also an eternal message, lesson, for every Jew in all generations. So we're going to take out a lesson, not only from Ephraim, who ended up getting the brachas first from Yaakov, but also from Menashe. Their phone is moving. So from this it's understood. As Yosef's that Yosef's argument that since Menashe is the Bechor, put your hand on his head from Menashe, put your hand on Menashe's head, is not given wasn't because Yosef made a mistake. And he didn't know that his younger brother will be greater, that Ephraim will be greater than Menashe. It's not Yosef didn't know that. But Yosef was of the view as the Maila for Menashe, that the advantage of Menashe was that greatness of Menashe, which makes him the Bechor, vekt iber the Maila for Ephraim, that overrides, that weighs more than the advantage of Ephraim. So it was just a matter of his view. He did have a greatness and over Ephraim and Menashe, but Yosef thought that that greatness deserves the blessing. And that means the haste as Beidin Yonim. Both of these matter. That means that side does was Yosef gehalten as the Maila for Menashe and Yisachar. This that Yosef was of the view that Menashe's greatness is greater than Ephraim's. Usai Yaakov shita as Ephraim Yisachar, and also the view of Yaakov that Ephraim is higher. Zanen emes, they are both true. But mitzad in Yonei Vavedosu shel Yosef, from because of the matters and the service of Yosef is Menashe, that to him Menashe is higher. Mitzad in Yonei, from the perspective and the matter of Vavedosu shel Yaakov, for Yaakov is Ephraim. That's why to Yosef Ephraim is higher, to Yosef Menashe is higher, and to Yaakov Ephraim is higher, and it has to do with their general approach, with their avodah, with their matters, the way Yaakov and Yosef. The father's Etman, and that's why we actually see as with the Yosef Yulat Shnei Banim. So when we talk about to Yosef, there were two sons born. Is Abchor Menashe? So the Bechor is Menashe. Was in Abchor state der Koyach Hav. In a Bechor stands the power of the father. Mervin the andere Kinder more than in the other children. Mashenkin in Zer Yachas to Yaakov, but as their relationship to Yaakov, over there says Shnei Banecha, your two sons, Gomer, that Yaakov says to Yosef, Lihem, they belong to me. What is the order of Seder? Over there says Ephraim and Menashe, Keruven, Veshimon, Yuli. So he starts off with Ephraim and Menashe, and to me, Li, emphasis Li, they're going to be like Reuven and Shimon, which means Ephraim comes first, far Menashe. And it's Keruven Bechor Yaakov. He's like Reuven the Bechor Yaakov. So now the Rebbe is going to explain what is it about the Avodah of Yaakov and the Avodah of Yosef, and then we'll see what's the difference between Menashe and Ephraim and how the relationship differs between Yaakov's approach and Yosef's approach. Ois Gimel. Der Chiluk zwischen Menashe and Ephraim, the difference between Menashe and Ephraim und euch wie der Ilui from Menashe is Shaykh to Yosef, and also how the advantage of Menashe connects to Yosef, von Ephraim, and Ephraim's greatness, to Birchas Yaakov, to Yaakov's blessing. That men verstehen von dem Unterschieden Zeir Nemen, will understand it between the difference of their names. Beide Nemen, both names, Menashe, which he was named Al Shem, Kinashani Elikim, as Kol Amoli, as Kol Beis Avi. Hashem has made me forget all my troubles in my father's home, to constantly remember Beis Avi, as the Rebbe will say, when Ephraim, Al Shem Ki Frani Elikim, that it's on you, that Hashem has made me fruitful in the land of where I was poor, oppressed. Dricken ois the gefilun, they express the feelings, was the Yerida Mitzrayim Hotaris gerufen by Yosef, that the descent into Egypt had brought out by Yosef. He named his sons on his feelings, what happened to him as he descended to Mitzrayim. Nor jeder Nomen in a verkehrten Kitzei, but each of these names in a opposite extreme. Der Nomen Menashe, the name Menashe, der Mont Yosef, the name Menashe reminds Yosef as Nashani Goimer Beis Avi. Nashani Beis Avi, as the Rebbe ties to the parentheses, doesn't mean that he is forgetting, that he doesn't know. But as gefindt sich in an Ort, was macht wegspringen. Nashani means to jump away. He finds himself in a place that causes him to jump away or to forget, von vergessen, Beis Avi, my father's house. So he always knows the fact that I am in a place that is trying to make me forget. So what does it mean? Direkt euch sein to shuka, that expresses his yearning. Nicht zu vergessen, not to forget, nor zu sein verbunden mit Beis Avi, to be connected, tied to his father's home. So that's the name of Menashe. Menashe is the desire to stay connected with his father's home. On the other hand, Ephraim, Hifrani Elikim Eretz and Oni, God has made me fruitful in the land of Oni, of my oppression. Is a shevach v'hoidoya of dem ilu v'Yisrael. Here he's praising and he's thanking for the elevation and the advantage. Hifrani made me fruitful. Was his beim geworden in Mitzrayim, that came to him in Mitzrayim. Die zwei Inyonim, these two aspects, eine verbunden mit the zwei Efanim, that's connected to the two ways in the Avodah von Eden Beretz Oni, how a Yid serves in the land of his affliction in Golus, when we find ourselves in Golus. Ein Eufen, the two approaches, one is the approach of Ephraim, and the other approach is Menashe. One way is horvet nicht zu bewirkt werden von der Sviva. He puts in a lot of effort. He works hard not to become influenced from his surrounding. Durchbleiben zugebunden mit Beis Avi, by remaining tight, by remaining connected to his father's home. Der Matzavier is given farther in Golus. That's standing the situation as he was before descending into Golus. At der Monzich Kiseder, he reminds himself constantly as gefindt sich in a Matzav, that he finds himself in a situation was most macht vergessen Beis Avi, that causes him to forget his father's home. So he's constantly fighting that notion. Und das spoiled. So this impacts him as soll nicht vergessen, so that he shouldn't forget. Because he always knows, Nashani, that he's in a place which makes him forget. He's trying to stay strong, to constantly remember and never forget his home. That's one way of working in the Golus. Second way is, und seine Aveda is in Eretz Anya. He is, and his services, he is in the land. He's in Golus, in affliction. In the Mchoshech HaGolus, he's in the darkness of the exile, he's in an Eifen to the extent, as by him is Nito Eifazoifil, he doesn't have to such an extent the Zikaron from Beis Avi. He doesn't remember his father's home so well. He finds himself in darkness, he finds himself in Golus. Und dorten Horveter, but over there, he works hard to illuminate that darkness of the exile with the light of holiness. Durch dem wird aufgetan an Ilui wie Yisro in euch in dem Odom Ha'evet. Through this working, overcoming the darkness of the exile, this accomplishes an elevation and an advantage also the person that works. Biz as hifrani elikim. Dafke beretzion. Hifrani, have become fruitful. God has made me fruitful, specifically beretzion. These are the two. So Ephraim and Menashe in Yosef's experience, what Yosef was expressing by naming them Ephraim and Menashe, which are the two services when a person is in Golus, either by constantly trying to stay connected, or even if you're lacking a little bit of that connection, but you're turning around within the place of darkness, you become Hifrani and accomplish in Eretz Anya. Dalad, this is the Tam, and this is the reason for Vos Ephraim is Yigdal Mimenu for Menashe. Yaakov says that Ephraim is going to be greater than Menashe. Because while the tachlis ilui from the Yeride Mitzrayim, because the ultimate goal, the ultimate elevation from the descent of going into Mitzrayim and Golus B'chlal and for going into Golus is Yerida Tzedek Aliyah. It's a descent for an elevation, which means you want to go Hecher V'koydem HaYerida, before. You want to go higher than before the descent. You don't only want to stay strong and not forget, not only not to forget Beis Avi, nor be Ike, but mainly to accomplish in Golus, in the Golus. As Ezel Tzukum and Yisrael, there should be added an advantage through the Yerida, through this descent. To give this being fruitful. Shem make me fruitful in Eretz Anya. Le'idach, on the other hand, is Menashe the Bechor. Menashe is still the firstborn. The Baal in Leidavi is Galus, because the way it is born and the way it's revealed, you have to start with step number one with Menashe and then to come to Ephraim. Das heißt, in Avodah Begilu Bepoil, when we talk about how does the service open, I'm talking about what is the goal, but the question is, how does one do their Avodah in a revealed and in actuality? Kumt Menashe frier v'Ephraim. Over there, Menashe comes before Ephraim. Der man can oifton in Eretz Anya, before one can accomplish in the land of Anya, in the affliction in Mitzrayim, as a Zozain Hifran Elikim, in order to become fruitful. Hashem should make me fruitful, which is Asay Toiv, which is do good, accomplishment. So first you must caution yourself As man soll nicht bewirkt werden von dem Choshech HaGolus. We should not become influenced from the darkness of the exile, which means sur merat, to stay away from evil. Durch ständige Gedenken, through constantly remembering, was I'm verbunden, to be connected, tied with Beis Avi, with my father's home. So you have to start by always remembering and staying strong. So that comes first. The birth, Menashe comes first. That is the actuality. However, what's the goal? The Baldo Ober as the Kavona is the Aliyah Ephraim. Since the intent is the elevation, that's Ephraim, Ifran Elikim. The Riber is Birchas Yaakov. So when we talk about the blessing of Yaakov, the Bracha Mesinas Koyach Milamayla, when we have the blessing and you give, which is the giving of the strength, the power from above, of the Raveda from the Golus on the service of the Golus, is Ephraim Choshever. So over there, Ephraim is more important. Yosem as Ephraim Lifnei Menashe, he placed Ephraim for Menashe. Yaakov places him for, because that's ultimately the goal and the purpose of everything. This the Rebbe explains in simple words, and the Rebbe is going to explain now also in a deeper explanation according to the different aspects that we can accomplish through our service in Golus and all the work, whether it accomplishes something we already had before, or we get like something totally new, the Yisra Ermin HaChoshech in our struggles. Hey, Atifra has brought in them a more deeper explanation in the above. In them Ilui v'Yisra was tutzich oif in Aiden. The advantage, the elevation and the advantage that is accomplished by a Yid durch the Avodah in Choshech HaGolus, through the service in the darkness of the Golus, seinen Faran kamo inyonim. So there are several matters. Talk about three matters. Aleph, first, the Yerida Rufta Reis, dem Toikev HaNeshama. Because of the descent, it brings out, it calls out to the force of the soul. Nicht zu bewirkt werden von dem Choshech HaGolus, not to become impacted, influenced by the darkness of the Golus. The descent gives you, brings out in you that force to not become influenced. Bedugma, similar, the Amenaged Davke, Rufta Reis Midas HaNetzochim. If there's an opposition, then you want to be victorious. The Choshech, the Golus, that brings out your strength. Well, Derech Mashekot Nisbayer, what it's Mashenemar, similar to what the Pasuk says. Somelucho nafshi goimer, if my soul thirsts to you, etc. Why? By Ledis Beretz goimer, because he's in a land of a dry land where there is no parched land where there is no water. So therefore, the lack of having the availability of water makes him thirsty. That means when there's opposition, you become more thirstier when there's lack. And then you say, then you say, we wish that when things are well, when I'm in holiness, I should see you the same way as I saw you, as I thirst for you when it was difficult times. So we see when there is a menaged, when there is opposition, then there brings out more strength. Number two, tifer derfun, deeper than this. So here we're talking about a force that you have, but when do you apply that force? When there is opposition. So it's like pushing against in order to, but higher than that is actually to discover a new depth within yourself. Not a force that you have openly, but to discover something new. Tifer derfun, through a big descent, bringt sich heraus that tiferer teuke for the neshama. It comes out, it's brought out the deeper force of the soul. That has no limitations. Because of that deeper force of the soul that he brings out, he has the power, not only to remain whole. As der Golus poilt nit ken yeride in him, that the exile does not cause a descent in him, nor adrabe, but on the contrary, zu wirken auf sein Arum und aufheben zu sein Darge, but he actually influences, impacts his surrounding, and he raises them to his level, bis zu mahapech sein dem choshech hagolus la'or, to turn around the darkness of the exile to light. So first is to stay strong. Second is to find the deeper koyach to change things around. But these are all items that the soul has in of itself. A third and a higher level is to give the soul something he did not have before through that descent. These two aspects, they're only an advantage, they're only an elevation, an advantage, was kommt in der Neshama mitzad atzma, that comes in the soul on its own. See, is blois. The only thing is was odder ilu was is doing in the Neshama. This advantage that is in the soul, that comes revealed through the service in Golus. You didn't bring about a new level to the Neshama. It's the same Neshama, but you revealed forces that are within the souls already. However, there is yet a higher level. As kumt aber zu in the Neshama mitzad der Navid in Golus, but it does come to the soul from its work, and the exile noch a hecher inyan, even a higher matter. Gimel, durch dem was man macht über dem choshech hagolus loyer, through transferring and changing the darkness of the golus to become light, wird aufgetan in der Neshama Yisrael, there is accomplished in the soul an advantage, was is netoy in ir mitzad atzma, which does not exist in the soul on its own. Bedugmas habal tshuva, this would be similar to habal tshuva, welcher hat euch zechias, welche seine geworden misdonis. Habal tshuva has also such merits that came from his sin. His sins were turned around to mitzvahs. So that means mashenke by a tzaddik, as opposed to a tzaddik cannot have, only has that limited amount of mitzvahs that he does, but a Baal Tshuva takes those mitzvahs, he makes mitzvahs out of those averas that he did when he was, before he did tshuva, and his tshuva makes it a mitzvah. That means he gains more. This is the idea that through the golus, the neshama gets an advantage more than it has on its own. So der Mitz, Rebbe says in Noizvo, but man verstehen dem Chiluk zwischen Menashe and Ephraim, will understand the difference between Menashe and Ephraim. Beide seinen Kinder von Yosef. They're both children of Yosef. They bringen arois sein Inyan. They express, they bring out Yosef's aspect, who Yosef is, Al Shem, which is Yosef Hashem Libein Acher. He was named Yosef that Hashem should add to me another son, which means das meint the Hisofe. We're talking about the addition was vert uvgeton durch the avodah in Golus that is being accomplished through the service in the Golus. Machun von Acher aben. Bein Acher means to make into a son from somebody who is Acher. To take the Acher, Sidra Achra, and make it into a Ben. So this is Yosef. Yosef's idea is to change things around and make from the others into a son. Now in them, Gufa seine Verandit zwei Darges. But in this, there is the two steps. Menashe, der Teuke was a Korn von Beis Avi Kanal. Menashe is the force of the remembrance of my father's home. That's the Teuke of Hanishama, was is Nisgali geworden by Yosef, and that's the force of the soul that has been revealed by Yosef durch sein Avodah in Mitzrayim, through his work in Mitzrayim. Ephraim weist aber auf in Yisro na Oir. Ephraim points to the advantage of the light, was is nimshach geworden min hachoshech, that has been drawn from the darkness, atzmai, from the darkness itself. Ifrani lekim davke beretzoni. Hashem has made me fruitful, specifically beretzoni. Un hayois, and since as der hechster ilui is der Yisrael, so the highest elevation is the advantage that comes more min hachoshech, was wird nimshach min hachoshech atzmai, that comes from choshech itself. The riber is Ephraim hecher from Menashe. That's why Ephraim is higher than Menashe. Okay, but that would seem Yosef. Yosef has two sons, has to accomplish changing around within Golus, whether it is the keeping his strong level and that way not being influenced and getting the strength for his neshama. And Ephraim brings out how there's additional light, Yisrael and Achoshech. But they're both children of Yosef. And Yaakov was Yosef's father. So remembering the father should really connect Menashe with Yaakov. So how come by Yaakov he sees the advantage of Ephraim? Yosef, who is Yosef Hashem li bein achar, he should be connected to Ephraim, and Yaakov should be connected to Menashe. And here we see verkehrt. Let's look inside Zayin. Them wird aber schwerer zu verstehen, but according to this, it's even more difficult to understand. The shaykhs from Menashe to Yosef and Ephraim to Yaakov. The connection from Menashe to Yosef and Ephraim to Yaakov. L'chayra pianal, it would seem, based on the above, how gedav zayin verkehrt. It should have been the other way around. Menashe was kum der monen auf Beis Avi Kanal. Menashe, which is coming to remind of his father's house, as mentioned before. And he should be more connected to Yaakov because Nasa need to remember Yaakov, because his home, Beis Avi, Yosef's house, Yosef's father's house, which is Yaakov. And Ephraim, that should be connected to the Reisofa, to the addition was kum to through the Avodah of Yosef li ben Achar. Through the Avodah, his name was Yosef. We said before, Yosef Hashem li ben Achar, bring me in another son. The advantage is Oyer min hachoshech. So why do we connect Menashe with Yaakov and Menashe with Yosef and Ephraim with Yaakov? But das verstehen behagdem abiyur in Posik. To stand first to explain the verse, the Posik, Yaakov says to Yosef, "Ato shnei banecha nelod mucha be'eretz Mitzrayim." And now, the two sons that were born to you in land Mitzrayim. And he goes through and he says, "Ad boyi elecha," till I come to you. He gives him a very clear sign. He says, "Those two sons that were born to you till I came to Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim, lihem, they'll be mine. Ephraim and Menashe is kiruv mishim and yuli. Ephraim and Menashe will be like Ruven Shimon." Because though you need verstanding, but it's not really understood. He wants to give him a sign who they are. You could say, could have said shortly, Ephraim and Menashe, lihem kiruv mishim and yuli. Your two sons, Ephraim and Menashe, will be like Ruven Shimon. Why does he have to say, what is the arichas and pasuk? Why is the pasuk prolonged? Those that were born to you in land of Mitzrayim until I came to Mitzrayim. Seems like that's the reason. It's not just telling him who these kids are. Those are the two kids that were born to him. Ephraim and Menashe, we know who they are. But he's explaining to him why is Lihaim, because since they were born in Eretz Mitzrayim till I came to you, Mitzrayim. Yesh Leimar, say this is nit blois a siman. This is not only a sign. Welche von the Bnei Yosef gehen rein b'minyan hashvatim? Which one of the sons of Yosef are included in the number of the tribes? Now, this is oich atam v'hasbara. This is also a reason and an explanation. Why do they belong to Yaakov? Lihem. He's explaining why they're mitzad them. Because they were born to Yosef in the land of Mitzrayim. And when? Until I came to you, in that time of the born, is the Far Lihem. That's why they belong to me. Yaakov is saying the reason they belong to me is because they were in Mitzrayim before I even came there. The Pashtus. Simply what it means. Durch them. Very simply, it would mean because the fact that even before me and you raised them like that in such a way, that makes them like mine, because beyond the expectation, how could you raise children like that? Durch them was Chodesh and geboren geworden in Mitzrayim. Through this, that although they were born in Egypt, and they were raised in an environment where Yaakov hat sich nicht gefunden, and Yaakov was not there. Und von des wegen, and still haben sie sich geführt. They still conducted themselves wie Yaakov's Einiklach, as grandchildren of Yaakov, is Lihem, they're mine. In them drückt sich aus die Emes Shleimus von Yaakov. This expresses the true wholesomeness from Yaakov, that his grandchildren being away and still raised in the way that Yaakov's grandchildren need to behave. So this is, the Rebbe explains a side way, but now the Rebbe says, but when I verstehen from was in them Inyan, hat Yaakov Magdi given Ephraim from Menashe. In this aspect of it, Yaakov proceeded and mentioned, it says, Ephraim and Menashe, first Ephraim before Menashe. Kinal Sibeis, as we said earlier, Sibeis. Bald as Menashe weist, bis wird nicht nifsek der Zekorner und der Scheiches zu Beis Ovi. Menashe shows that there is no interruption. The novelty of Yaakov's grandchildren is where there is an interruption, and still bearing grandchildren of Yaakov. In Menashe, since it's not interrupted, the Zekorna, when the Sheiches to Beis Ovi, and his connection to his father's home, Kenal Barucha, come to Ois. So it turns out as mitzad dem oifen havoida, from that type, style of service, is netod that emes matzev, there isn't the true standing for ad boi eilacha mitzrayim. There's another Indian from till I come to you mitzrayim. Balsis kiseder faran. There is a Koran Beis Ovi. It's not really until I came to you, because he was there before too. There's a Koran Beis Ovi, basically in Menashe's style of avodah, kinashan elikim, to stay connected with his father's home. So that means that Ovi is there even when he's not there, but he's still there. The Ramitius Hamatzev from Adboye Lecha Mitzrayim. When is the true situation in which until I came to you Mitzrayim is an Ofen Havodah from Ephraim? That is the style, the type of service of Ephraim. That means, that shows, that points that you still are in the land of your affliction. You cannot see externally. You can't tell. You can't tell that he's connected with Yaakov, his father's home. Und von deswegen is that Oved Avedose, he still serves his service in a way as es is in him nicker, as it is Yaakov's anenical, that you can tell that he's Yaakov's grandchild. That's Says Mavur in Chassidus, explain the Chassidus, as Yaakov is Midas Ha'emes. Yaakov is the measure of truth. But says Mavriach min hakotza lakotza. Truth goes from one extreme to the other extreme. For them, Kutzei Achi Elyon from the highest corner, Biz the Kutzei Achi Tach to the lowest corner. That's Yaakov. Bepoil Fitzach Dosoisa, who accomplishes it, who does it in actuality, Durch Yosef. But Yaakov mitzad atzmi is madregos in Atzilus. Yaakov in of itself is his level is Atzilus. Hecher from El Mesbiad. This is higher from the words of Bri Yitzirasiyah. When Yosef traktarab madreges Yaakov Atzilus in El Mesbiad. He is the one that brings down Yaakov's level into the worlds of Bri Yitzirasiyah. Bizin Elam Haza Hatachtim Kitzach Hitachten till the lower this world, the low world, which is the lowest and lowest corner. Those is their tam pnimi, and that's accomplished through Yosef. Those is their tam pnimi. This is the inner reason was durch Yosef is given the Yerida for Yaakov and Mitzrayim. That it was through Yosef that the descent of Yaakov took place, went down to Egypt. Mitzrayim u'gevulim elam is biyah, the limitations and boundaries, which is the world of biyah. So that is Yosef brought down Yaakov into Mitzrayim. Same thing is as the highest corner. That it's specifically when darkness is turned to light. Yosef Hashem li bein acher, to add a the acher make a bein. Verder yisrein ha'oir min ha'choshech. So that brings the additional advantage of the light that comes from darkness. Hecher from Atzilus, this brings it higher from Atzilus, Madreges Yaakov Tzadatzmei, Yaakov's level of itself. So while Yaakov is in Atzilus, but Yosef bringing it down all the way into the lowest world, he gets it and reaches into the higher world, higher than Atzilus, which is Yaakov's level. Der mit is Menach Mevayer. With this, we also explain why the 17 years that Yaakov was in Israel given seine beste Jahr. Why were they his best years? As we say, Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim Shvas Rishona. Why is it? Well, Davke durch the Yeride Mitzrayim, because it's specifically through the descent in Egypt. Yaakov is going down to Israel. He came to his wholesomeness. In other words, that he came to the place from higher than Atzilus. From the highest to the lowest, through going to the lowest, to the Yerida Mitzrayim, he got to the highest. That's why those were his best years, because he reached that higher level. Yud. The Baldas of Ephraim and Menashe vernehmen Mekoim Yosef in Minyan HaShvatim. Ephraim and Menashe, they take up the space of Yosef in the number of the tribes. He's verstandig, it's understood, as he seinen am ein von Toldos Yaakov Yosef, that they too, just like Yosef brought down, we said before from Chassidus, that Yosef brings down Yaakov's aspects into the world, so they, being in the places of the tribes, makes them also told this Yaakov Yosef that Yaakov's life was brought down by Yosef. In order to bring down Yaakov's matters in Eretz Mitzrayim. Just like you'll see this, we speak about Yosef, we're going to apply this also to Menashe and Ephraim. And in this, the way they bring it down, there is an accomplishment with regards to Yosef. The Rebbe is going to bring out now the three levels of Yosef, Menashe, and Ephraim would fit the three levels that the Rebbe discussed earlier. By Yosef, by Yosef, even as he descends in Mitzrayim, the world of Yah, is Madreges Yaakov, is Meir Madreges Yaakov Atzilus begin. By him, the level of Yaakov shines, Atzilus is open, is revealed. Since in Yosef's avoida, it shines, it lights openly Yaakov's influence. What's his hecher from Mitzrayim Biyah, which is higher than Biyah? Kinal, as we mentioned earlier, is melachatchila nito kein ort of Helam v'hester from Mitzrayim. So to begin with, there is no room for any obscurity and blockage of Egypt. Egypt doesn't block on the level of Yosef because he brings down the level of Atzilus openly into Biyah. Adrabah, it is sheltered Mitzrayim. Yosef becomes the ruler, dominates Mitzrayim. So kumtois. So it turns out, as Mitzad Avedus Yosef, that from Yosef's Aveda is noch nicht given the embassy Yerida. There wasn't the true descent. On the Aveda in the Cheshach of Mitzrayim Mamash and having a work in the actual darks of Mitzrayim, it wasn't in the furthest corner. With the Cheshach is menaget to Eira Kedusha, as there is an opposition for the Cheshach. In this case, there was no Cheshach because Yosef dominated the Cheshach, but it didn't come down to the level which opposes the Eira Kedusha. Al derech, yes, is given in Pashtus, similar as it was in the occurrences what took place. As Kozman Yosef had gelebt, as long as Yosef lived, there could be no decrees against the Jews. It's as if we had not yet descended to Mitzrayim. Erst when Yosef dies, is Ki'ilu Oisa Yom Nichus Mitzrayim, as if that day they entered Egypt. But meaning that Yosef did not bring up the source of Rabbi, meaning that the true experience of Golus was not experienced by Yosef. As opposed to the two sons, Shminash and Ephraim, they were already in Golus. Specifically, through the two sons that were born to you in Mitzrayim, until I came to Mitzrayim, which means the avodah in an ort, the service in such a place was zetzich on Madreges Yaakov. We don't see Madreges Yaakov in the Choshech from Mitzrayim was his mailim umaster umanaged to kedusha, in the darkness of Egypt, which blocks and obscures and opposes kedusha. Tutzich oiv the shleimus from Yaakov, and over there Yaakov's wholesomeness is accomplished. He goes all the way to the bottom. That he goes through from the highest to the lowest level. So Didraye Fanimanal Yudalef. I said before the three. I said Yosef, Menashe, and Ephraim, but no, but Yaakov, Yosef, and Bnei Yosef. Those are the three levels. The Draye Fanimanal, the three above mentioned. Aleph, Yaakov was mitzad atzma yizer hecher Mitzrayim. Yaakov, who on his own is higher than Egypt. Beis Yosef was malach Mitzrayim midrash for Yaakov. Yaakov, Yosef, as he illuminates Egypt with the influence he gets from Yaakov. And Gimel Bnei Yosef was the lion in the Mechoshech for Mitzrayim. There is mitzad atzma. They reach into the darkness of Egypt as it is in its darkness, not as illuminated by Yosef. They generally fit to the Drayin Yonemanal, to the three matters in Sifhei, in the Yisrael was very of the Yerid in Golus, in the advantage that is accomplished through the descent in Golus. In the Ersten Inyan, in the first matter, as Mitzad dem Tekev HaNeshama Shalamaylo, that because the force of the soul of above, can der Golus need poilen, can Yerida in der Neshama. The Golus cannot impact a descent in the soul. We're not changing the darkness of the Golus, but it doesn't have an effect because of the force of the Neshama. So it turns out as if we separated Hecher from Golus, higher than Golus. The Dugma to Yaakov and was mitzad atzmi is a Hecher for Yered Zayin Mitzrayim. That is similar to the level of Yaakov, which on his own he's higher. He doesn't go down into Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim doesn't impact him. He's in Atzilus. Zweiter Ring, and the second matter as Lagab Edem Toikev Haneshama is Nitshayich Kain Menagid. That relative to the force of the soul, there could be no opposition. And therefore also the darkness of the exile is also turned to light. That is similar to the service of Yosef. In Mitzrayim. He brings the level of Yaakov into Egypt. And the turning around from the darkness to light, that becomes because of the revelation of Atzilus Yaakov in Biyah Mitzrayim. So how is it changed? It's not changed from Biyah itself. It's changed because Yosef brings the light of Atzilus. He brings Yaakov into Elotolus Yaakov Yosef, brings him into Mitzrayim. And therefore, there is no opposition. You can turn around the darkness. But under Yisrin was nimshach von dem Choshech Gufa. But the advantage of the light which comes from the darkness itself, that is accomplished mainly during the Avodah in the Choshech from Mitzrayim, through the work in the darkness of Egypt. Wo setzt sich nicht on the Ashpo von Yaakov, and you don't see Yaakov's influence. But no, the Banecho Hanelod Mechoberes Mitzrayim Ad Boi Lecho Gomer. Oisid base. A Pikola now based on the above it, we understand the Shaykhs. So now we'll understand the connection. The Rebbe asked, what's the connection from Menashe to Yosef? Was der Vater is Rabbi Chaim Yosef, that's Rabbi Chaim Yosef. Und Ephraim to Yaakov. Bald as in Yoneshel Menashe is to Megala Zayin dem Zekorim from Beisovi. Since Menashe's aspect is to reveal the remembrance of his father's home. Und durch them is Mahaper dem Choshech from Mitzrayim, and that way he turns around the darkness of Mitzrayim. Is dos bedugma Savaydus Yosef. That is similar to the service of Yosef as Trakta Rabbi Gilui, which brings down openly in Yonah Yaakov in Biyah. It brings down Yaakov's matter into Biyah. And durch them verdis habcha. That's the way it's turned around. So that's the way Menashe functions to swap the Choshech by bringing down Yaakov into Mitzrayim. The shleimus from Yaakov is aber davki in dem Yisrael and Choshech Hatzma. But the advantage of the light is when it comes from darkness itself. Was wird aufgetan durch Ephraim. Yaakov's accomplishment isn't sufficient with Menashe. His real is to take the darkness and make light of it, to make the Eur Mina Choshech. Das wird aufgetan durch Ephraim, Ephraim Elakim, Beretzoni. Yud Gimel. Eden werden angerufen als Shem Yosef. Called by name Yosef. Pasuk says, Noiheg Katzoin Yosef. He leads us as Yosef's sheep, meaning that Yosef was the shepherd. He's the full moven. So for this you understand that by Yeder Eden darf sein beide avodas. By every Yid, there needs to be both avodas because Yosef is our shepherd. Sei von Menashe, sei von Ephraim. Both from Menashe and Ephraim. Zum allem ersten darf sich ein Yid wünschen und glusten of Yid should wish himself and yearn to sein in Beisovi, to be in his father's home. To sein in a matzav was his hecher from Golus, to be in a situation which is higher than Golus. Sein arop nideren in Helem ha'ilom. The fact that he has to descend in the obscurity of the world, in order to sort out the Golus, he is forced by Hashem, so therefore he goes down. Onus al pi adibu, you're forced to do so. B'meila, and therefore v'inore ending zayin shlichus as soon as he finishes his mission in the Mgolusart, in the place of exile, with Ashgochel Yonatim Geschikt, where the divine supervision, divine providence sent him. Atläuft gleich. He runs away immediately. In an ort where er sich abgeben in ganz, in a place where he can devote himself totally. Nor mit inyana kedusha, only with holy matters, Torah v'avoda, Torah and service of Hashem. The idoch, on the other hand, after revision, we have to know as Kol's man that is shlichus in Golus. As long as he is in his mission in exile, Torah is nicht banugenen. Mit der avoda from Menashe, he cannot be satisfied with the service of Menashe. So avoden nor zich, just to protect himself. As is only vergessen based on that he shouldn't forget. It can't be just a Menashe. Und nicht bei Wirtschaft von der Sviva. And not to be influenced with. That's not sufficient. The avoda is a chona. So this service of both Menashe and Ephraim is a chona to tachlis hamakuvan, to a preparation to the ultimate intention. As Zayin Ephraim Elokim Beretz Onyi, we should be fruitful. Hashem makes us fruitful in the land of our Onyi, of our oppression, but like in the B'chosh Chagolus, to illuminate the darkness of the Golus with their mitzvah Torah, with the light, lamp of mitzvah and the light of Torah, bis zum Hapach and B'chosh Chagolus, to the extent to turn around the darkness of the Golul to light, the Laila Kayim Yoyer, and the night will shine like the day. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Vayechi, Tovshin Lamed.